Good afternoon, everyone. Today to another exciting episode of PWHR Voices. Today we have with us Mr. Sudeep Ralhan, CHRO Upstox. Sudeep, we welcome you.
Thank you.
The topic of our discussion today is servant leadership, putting the needs of your team first. Just a small summary or an introduction to what the topic actually speaks about for people who do not know. Servant leadership is a leadership style that emphasizes the needs of the team over the needs of leader. In this leadership approach, the leader focuses on serving the team and helping them achieve their goals rather than focusing solely on their own interest or goals. A servant leadership also leads by example, by modeling the behavior and values they want to see in their team. They demonstrate empathy, humility, and a commitment to ethical and responsible decision making. So now I open the forum to you, Sudeep, for you to actually elucidate your views on what exactly you think is servant leadership and how do you think this kind of leadership is being practiced in companies today. You can give your own example if you're following some bits of it within your own organization, or you can actually quote examples and give us some anecdotes on the same.
So thanks for that. First of all, thanks for inviting me and having me on this program. One of my favorite quotes is, "You don't build a business, you build people, and they build a business." And I think a lot of our business leaders tend to sort of forget that. So everyone who thinks that servant leadership is some sort of buzzword, a fad, or it's a utopian world, and it's too esoteric for our liking, they're actually wrong. It's a word that is very, very rooted in practicality. Because if you're truly building a business for the long term and truly building an organization for the long term versus focusing on short-term benefits, you will adopt servant leadership as your leadership philosophy and your style, right? And that helps, of course, people, because you're putting people at the center and you're focusing on their well-being and their needs. So you are making sure that you have a workforce that feels heard and respected and involved, which means that you are automatically going to see them a lot more engaged and a lot more connected, right? It makes your life easier as a leader because you're leading through influence and relationships and authority rather than control and toxicity. And therefore, you're building a longer term organization, like I said, which is innovative from the grounds up, which is collaborative, and which is truly creating a culture that helps people stick to you, which is a challenge that all organizations are facing right now.
Fair enough. So, according to you, how can putting the needs of your team first benefit the company, the leader, and the organization on the whole? Do you think it is a kind of leadership style which is sustainable in long term?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I said, right? I mean, it really helps you drive sustainable growth. I mean, in today's day and context, we are seeing a lot of our leaders across especially in the tech world and startups and so on, face very tough questions and face very tough business questions. Now, the answer to that question lies whether in this point about whether you want to achieve short-term goals or longer-term sustainability. And if you're choosing servant leadership, you're automatically choosing long-term sustainability. It's not an easy answer, though, right? Not all leadership styles can be practiced at any point of time. You have to be conscious that a certain organization needs it. And I think that's what the need of the hour is. And you asked earlier about examples as well, right? I mean, there are so many examples across the India ecosystem, for example, right? So starting with the founding fathers, if we speak about Gandhiji and the leaders at that time, they were not in the "I am leading you" mode. They were "I am serving you," right? And a lot of statespeople that we respect, Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King, they were all from the same cloth, right? And a few decades later, if you think about Jack Welch in GE, and he said something like, when you become a leader, your success lies in the growth of people. And that actually became the foundation of the great people practices that GE is known for over the decades, right? And then, I've been fortunate enough to work with organizations like that all the time, right? GSK, I saw for the first time sales leaders walking in the path of the sales executives from day to night up till the last point, demonstrating empathy and saying, "I get you. I get what you go through, and therefore you are able to trust me." That's an important point, right? I've seen in Walmart, Doug McMillan sort of leading 2.2 million, 2.3 million people across the world through very difficult times with a very calm and a very controlled demeanor, and focusing on truly a servant leadership mindset where he's genuinely humble and speaking and thanking people for everything that they do. And at Upstox as well, I mean, it's interesting to see we go through the same cycles and the same challenges as a lot of other startups too. But the
Mm-hmm.
principle that governs us, and when we talk as a leadership team with our founders, right, is really about what do people really need? What is the people-centric way of doing it? What is the right way of doing it? And I think if you ask these questions, these examples are around us. They sometimes just get drowned out by the noise that is around us right now.
Also, each leader has its own leadership style as well.
That's true.
Prior to previously there were situations wherein for years a certain kind of leadership was actually adopted by the successive leaders, but today everyone is coming with their own set of goals and agendas, and they have their own set of way to deal with people and to deal the company. Very rightly said. These days, leaders are also focusing on the fact that if my team is exceeding, if my team under me is excelling, that is actually my growth, which showcases the fact that my leadership and the skills that I've been imbibing and I've been putting within the company is actually reaping in fruits.
Right,
So,
right, absolutely.
how in your view can servant leadership be applied in remote work environment? That's really a very important aspect to look into, because in that way people are not around you, they're not sitting by you.
Correct.
You do not know what
Actually, I've
situations they're
broadened.
dealing into.
Correct. No, I've broadened that question. It's not just a work environment. We are actually facing multiple challenges right now. The first is that the world is going through tremendous change, and there's a sense of uncertainty everywhere. So that's challenge number one. Challenge number two is uh, the fact that a lot of workforces are working in either a remote or a hybrid environment, which means that in person connect is limited. And the third challenge is, for better or for worse, a lot of the leaders that you see right now who are gaining prominence, both on the political and the business landscape, are all the cult type of leaders, right? They all believe in a cult style of leadership. There's a lot of I, me, myself going on, and everyone is applauding them for that, right? Which is counterintuitive to servant leadership. But in this environment, and I think I was actually reading a study by DDI, a global leadership study, which was conducted recently, and they said only 46% of leaders trust their direct managers, and only 33% right now trust the senior leaders in the system. And that is so sad. That is reflective of the culture and the issues that we were facing in 2007, 2008 during those crisis times. We are genuinely going through those crisis times. So I think there are two things which I feel organizations and leaders can do to take a step back and regain control if they truly want to build a longer term organization and culture. The first is get in listening mechanisms and make sure that you close the loop with the organization, right? So beyond just 6 monthly surveys and standard surveys, but really real time listening mechanisms, and also closing the loop, right? Going back and making sure that you are sharing with people what the updates are. And the second is, I think leaders themselves need to become a lot more approachable and connected. And by that, I don't mean that they need to be always on Twitter, because Twitter is still a one to many conversation, right?
Right.
They need to be having unstructured, unscripted conversations with their teams, with their people, right? Ask me anything is a very simple thing. It's been around for a while, but ask me anything sessions, right? I think are the simplest way of various leaders across various functions sort of connecting with their teams and really making sure that all the qualities that you described earlier on empathy, on listening, on and so on are genuinely demonstrated.
Okay, fair enough. Personally, if I may ask, what is a kind of leadership that you've been practicing within your own organization, considering that, you've been working with myriad of organizations and sectors. So, what is your personal leadership style that you think has been effective enough for you to lead your people along with you?
I think that's a great question, and thanks for putting me on the spot as well. I would like to say that, I've always been a follower and practitioner of servant leadership, but that would be wrong. I think there are different times and different phases which call for different kind of leadership styles. But I will say that, irrespective of the scale and the industry of the organization I've worked with, whether it be with an Accenture where there are hundreds of thousands of people, or whether it be with an Upstox where there are a few hundred people. What I've been very fortunate is that I've been able to have a people centric view in decision making, right? So, like I said, even when we are going through business challenges at Upstocks, our first priority is how do we make sure that we take care of our people. Similarly, when we are talking about, an entire organization change that we went through in GSK, it was really about doing the right thing for the people and keeping people at the center of the design. So I think that's really what comes through and a people-centric view of things. Is it always practiced 100% beautifully and accurately? No. But are we conscious of that and are we learning from it? I would say yes.
In serving leadership, I mean, in this kind of leadership wherein you're actually thinking that you're serving your people, there's certain discrepancies as well, wherein the employees themselves, they might feel that maybe you're partial to somebody else's gains or losses more. Maybe you're not equal in approach to listening to somebody's problem and ignoring others. While that, I mean, of course, a leader will never do that on purpose. So this is one of the challenge. Before talking to you, we had a word with other industry leaders as well, and they feel that while their intention is to serve people, but they're not able to maintain that equilibrium wherein every employee feels that I'm being wanted. How would you, if you're in this spot, how would you react to it, and what would be your mode of resolving this issue?
I think closing the loop and reverse communication is equally important. So you're right. Listening mechanisms are only as effective as the tool that you're using, the people that get represented in those mechanisms. So if you're, for example, deployed a chatbot who's chatting with, say, everyone every day, but only 40% of the people respond to it, you will get responses from those 40 and you will take decisions based upon those 40%, right? Not the entire 100%. But I think if you go back and share in your next town hall or whatever and say, this is what we heard, this is a summary of what we heard, this is what we believe we will do in response to what we've heard, then I think that helps people achieve a sense of closure. And if that's also a point where people can raise their voice and say, this is not true, this is not reality. So I think just doing a double check and doing a bit of reverse communication helps to set expectations. And even if those 60% of the people have not expressed their opinion earlier, at least it lets them know that somewhere you reached out and somewhere you've tried to incorporate the views of everyone else as much as possible. But I think people are also smart enough to know that anything that you do, it's you're never going to have a situation where 100% of the people are happy all the time.
Of course.
That's not going to be true. And servant leadership does not equal to making everyone happy. Servant leadership is about making sure that you serve the needs of the people. And sometimes that can involve taking tough decisions as well. So servant leadership is not equal to happiness. Servant leadership just means that you are focusing on people and you're making sure that they feel heard and respected. And I think that's a super important
part. And you very rightly said that, even if you do anything to keep everything on their platter, not every employee will always be happy with you. And it is also said that, if an employee is happy with their employer at all times, which means the leadership style is in question. So I get that. What, according to you, is that one thing that all leaders can do to build a servant leadership mindset? Not practice this as a practice within the organization, but at least the mindset needs to be in sync.
I think the first step is really just self-awareness, right? A lot of our leaders, I'm very happy to see the kind of engagement that our leaders have nowadays on LinkedIn, for example, where they are, keeping themselves abreast of what's happening in the world. They are exchanging ideas, they're exchanging opinions and so on, which is fantastic. I think equally important is them going a little bit deeper inside themselves and really asking themselves some tough questions. Like most leaders, if you ask them, they would love to see humility, trust, kind of behavior in their teams. But the tough question is, are you being a role model? Are you genuinely being a role model for those behaviors? Are you truly an example that, for all of these behaviors? Another tough question is, what are the kind of behaviors that you are rewarding and incentivizing? You might think that you want to build a great culture, a collaborative culture, innovation on the ground, etc. But are you rewarding the leaders who demonstrate that, or are you rewarding something else? Uh, Similarly, what kind of decisions are you taking? Are you taking decisions from a quarter to quarter point of view, or from a annual to annual point of view, or from a 5 year horizon? These are tough questions, but I believe that these are truly the questions that will help us figure out where we are today. And if we want to go towards the direction of servant leadership, which is not an easy journey, then that's the place to start.
Okay. And lastly, Sudeep, you have dealt with number of teams, number of companies. Any one instance that you always remember in a way of presenting a new kind of leadership and wherein you face challenges yourself? I mean, any leader would face challenge if they're trying to bring in a new concept on table, while
Right.
joining any new organization. So any anecdote that you can share with us on the challenges you dealt in your times while you were dealing with your teams?
I think one of the biggest challenges, which I'm sure most HR people and HR leaders have dealt with in the last few decades, is around the change and evolution in performance management. And I've kind of seen that in all the previous organizations I've worked with, Accenture and then GSK and then Walmart, uh, as leaders tried to bring in ideas around performance management, which are radically different from how it was done earlier, right? In a relatively conservative pharmaceutical organization like GSK, you had Sir Andrew Whitty, making some radical changes in the way of measuring and incentivizing and rewarding performance, right? Which was radical. But I think that's a great example of where it was not a one size fits all top down approach. It was genuinely a conversation that he started across the organization over many, many months, and his leadership team did it. And then, all of us as his HR leaders and HR partners continued that conversation with people. It wasn't an easy journey. It wasn't an easy change, but we all believe it was the right thing to do. But I think the beauty was not the what, the beauty was the how. And that to me remains a great example of how you bring an organization with you as you're driving change.
No, that's very a beautiful thought shared by you, Sudeep. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for imparting the knowledge as
Thank
well
you.
as the anecdotes and analysis that you've shared with us. I'm sure people will be really, happy to hear and must have some great takeaways from this session. For all those who have questions on this kind of leadership style or any other, you're free to ask Sudeep. You can tag Sudeep on LinkedIn, Twitter, as well as Facebook, and you can tag him and ask him the questions there itself, and he'll be happy to respond to all your queries. So thank you so much,
Thank
Sudeep.
you.
It was a pleasure for us to be speaking with you, and thank you for sharing the time to us.
Thank you. It was great being here, and thanks for focusing the attention on such an important topic at the time.
Thank you so much, Sudeep.